The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
I'm going to be their biggest and harshest critic, but I'm also their number one fan.
All right. Am I going to do this at number 1? I am. Go ahead, Anthony. Who's number 1?
Number 1.
Cameron Cheeseman. I cannot believe nobody asked. I went out to practice yesterday, and I didn't get a chance to ask Rivera this. I never got the microphone at the press conference because the press conference was before practice, and sometimes that happens. It's not me yelling at anybody. It's nobody's fault. It just happened. And nobody asked about it on Wednesday, and nobody asked about it after the game. But the long snapper has not had a clean game in the preseason, and he has not, to my knowledge, had a clean practice either. When they've actually done like field goals in game situations. He might have had some great snapping sessions on the side. I certainly hope so. I know he's working on a new technique, but we are now out of time. And Ron told me last week after the joint practices, he doesn't have it straightened out by the game, meaning the Baltimore game, then they're gonna have to start taking it more seriously. Well, they didn't bring anybody in. At some point, you don't have to ask the question because the answer is we're just rolling with Cheeseman. So I want to know how he does. He'll have Tressway to snap to, both as the holder and the punter. He hopefully will hit Tress in the hands every time he's asked to, and we never talk about it again. But every time I say I hope we never talk about it again, there's another bad snap, and we have to keep talking about it. So yeah, somehow, number 1 on my pick 6 at 6, the 6 guys I want to keep my eye on for Commanders Bengals is the long snapper. Let's go to number 2.
Number 2.
Ricky Stromberg. If he has another great performance at guard, I think that changes the calculus for this team in a really hopefully beneficial way for the rest of the roster. The old NFL saying is you've got to keep 10 linemen. I don't think that's true anymore. Now, I assume that the NFL would disagree with me, and I typically defer to the experts. But sometimes the NFL is just slow to move. They are not as quick to react to rule changes and things that affected old ways of thinking as they should be. They're not as nimble as they should be. And the ability to be nimble is actually what's at stake here. The ability to bring guys up in a pinch from the practice squad in a way that you used to not be able to, and to keep different players than you used to be able to keep on the practice squad. There used to be like age restrictions and experience, and now you can basically keep anyone on the practice squad that you can get there, that another team doesn't sign. They're exposed at all times to being signed to an active roster somewhere else, but you can try to sneak them on, and obviously if another team were to come calling and try to sign them, you could be like, we're going to sign you to or we're going to make you an offer and you can come to our active roster and just stay where you're at. So if Stromberg shows he can be a backup center and a backup guard, to me, that is one less lineman that you have to keep. And I think in a year where you want to keep an extra defensive lineman compared to the number you usually keep, and you might want to keep an extra receiver, or you're keeping a fullback, then that is extremely beneficial. And I just think there's enough guys that if Stromberg shows, hey, I'm the backup right guard and the backup center, that there might be enough guys on the practice squad that you feel comfortable moving on from a guy like Tyler Larson, or at least risking him to waivers and seeing if you can get him to the practice squad. So Stromberg has a huge role to play here tomorrow night in solidifying that backup right guard spot. And maybe, they don't see it that way. Maybe Chris Paul would be the backup at right guard, but I think Stromberg's played well enough that he might even actually be Sam Cosmi's backup if he were to go down. So that's great. I understand they want to probably keep Larson because they've had so many issues at center, but to me, I think his performance is really important. But then you get to kind of the next wave of guys, which brings us to
number 3.
And I'm going to, by name Aaron Montero, because I think he's the most intriguing of the bunch. Montero's been really good at guard. He has played tackle for them in the past. And again, if he plays well and you feel confident that if you had to go to him in a game, call him up of the practice squad and be like, hey, dude, you're going to play, that is really impactful. And I think there's a lot of guys of Aaron Montero's caliber, or at least what most teams think is Aaron Montero's caliber around the league. I don't think getting him to the practice squad is going to be hard. But he could show you internally a level of competence that gives you a really good feeling about him. Like, hey, we're just going to stash him on the practice squad, but if we need him, we know he's going to be ready. Trent Scott, I think, is in that same mold. Can he put it together and show like, yeah, I belong on this team, or belong as the first guy off the practice squad as the backup right tackle? I think his lack of positional versatility means you're more likely to get him to the practice squad. But if all of a sudden Wiley goes down and Cornelius Lucas is having to play left tackle, or whatever the reason, or you just now need another tackle to call up, can Trent Scott prove that the practice squad is he belongs there? But if you need him, he's going to be ready. And if these guys can prove that, I think you go 9 on the offensive line with a ton of really good options on the practice squad, and you save that roster spot somewhere else. Obviously, we'll do our roster projection on Monday. We'll do another one on Take Command as well. So lots of discussion of that to come next week. All right, moving on. Number 4. Quan Martin. He's had some. I like the way Del Rio put it. It's not that he's had 2 bad games. It's he's had 2 games where he's had really high-profile mistakes. I want to see him continue to bounce back. I want to see how he handles it. I want to see how he handles being out there as a second-round pick when, a lot of other high draft picks around the league probably aren't playing too much. So how does he play? How does he communicate? I think it's pretty self-evident why I think Quan Martin's pretty interesting. Can he carve out a role where you feel comfortable with him on the field immediately in week 1? I think a good day would go a long way to that. All right, next guy.
Number 5.
Dax Milne. Now, you're like, shouldn't it be Dax Milne or Kaz Allen? No, I kind of know what Kaz Allen is. He's a competent receiver with big explosive capabilities and a lot of explosive capabilities in the return game. I want to know if Dax Milne's more than a guy who can run nice routes in one-on-one drills and catch the ball and then get tackled. I want to know, do you have some explosiveness to you? Do you have the ability to generate big plays? Or at least, if you can't generate big plays, can you generate enough plays where you use your route running savvy to get open and be on the same page as your quarterbacks and move the ball down the field? He is a guy that on paper makes a lot of sense as a quote-unquote reliable guy, but his production says he doesn't really do a whole lot. So in the drills, he looks great. In isolated situations, he looks great. In practice, he looks fine. I want to know how he is as a gamer, and if he can't step it up and make some plays, then I would give that roster spot to Kaz Allen. I don't know that they're going to do that. And, his ability to run block is something that I want to try to keep an eye on tomorrow as well, because that's an area where he can make an impact that he's going to be better than Allen. At least he should hope he's way better than Allen as a small, quick, shifty guy, not exactly the prototypical blocker on the outside. So, yeah, Dax Milne over Kaz Allen is my guy to watch for number 5 at the wide receiver position. And last but not least,
Number 6.
the D-line group, I could pick any number of guys, but I'm going to circle Benning Po'otoe, whose name I probably just butchered again. I had it and then I lost it. So Benning, I apologize. It's not the worst butcher of his name, but that is not the point. The point is I should get it right. But Benning has been really, really good all throughout camp, and he made some plays the other day in the game, and this is a guy that I think he plays really, really well. I just don't think he fits on the roster, but he could play his way onto someone else's roster. So it's a big day for him. And if you're lucky enough to keep him on practice squad, that's great. But there is also a wackadoodle scenario where Big Phil starts the year on IR and you feel like you need another guy, and he could be the guy. They seem to mess with James Smith-Williams at the 3 technique. They tried Chase at the 3 technique, and then Chase got hurt. James didn't really play there much in the last game, so I wonder if they abandoned that experiment, which would seem kind of weird because I feel like he did a good job in the joint practices with it and made a couple of plays, but, we'll see. FA's played there in the past as well, but he's a guy that plays that 3 technique and could make things even more interesting. He is a good football player who I think has grown enough that he belongs in the NFL somewhere, and we'll see if it's in Washington or ultimately somewhere else. And it could be in Washington later this year after being called up from the practice squad. But we'll see if he can do enough to make it on an initial roster here or elsewhere.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.